What's going on, guys? It's Nick here, back with another video. Today we're going game by game, talking about the wide receivers I'd be starting and sitting this week. As always, if I don't answer your specific question, in this video you can look at my exact rankings and projections for your scoring format at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. So we'll get into the wide receivers in a second, but first, of course, have to start things off as usual, the stat of the day. Yesterday's stat was, so far this season, only one tight end has at least 65 targets but less than 500 receiving yards. The answer is Darren Waller, although I checked, because a lot of you were saying Hawkinson. Apparently it depends on the site. So some sites have him at 64 targets, some sites have him at 65 targets, so I'll just accept both answers for this one. Pistol Pete 22 actually got both of them right on Twitter first, so he gets that. And then Lump Nums got Waller first on YouTube, and Ashton Lancaster got that first for Hawkinson on YouTube. As for today's stat, among the top 20 wide receivers in half PPR scoring, who has the fewest touchdowns? All right, before we go over each game, I want to give a quick shout out to the weather this weekend. We're a little bit close to Sunday. I want to note that I am not going to factor weather into any of these takes, but there's two spots where we could see weather, and so this is just a, hey, on Sunday morning, check that out, look at the weather in these games, see if it's going to be a problem. It's Houston at Tennessee is going to see some rain, and then Colts at Bills is going to see rain and wind. Usually, weather is mostly overblown unless it's like a monsoon, a massive snowstorm, or insane winds. Don't really factor it in all that much. It affects defense just as much as offense at times. But if these games turned out to be bad, just verify that they're fine or bad on Sunday morning before the game. So those are the two spots. Again, Houston at Tennessee, Colts at Bills. That's the last time we're going to talk about weather in this video. Check it Sunday morning. So we'll start off with Packers at Vikings. This game has a 47.5 point total, and the Packers are 1.5 point road favorites. The Packers obviously start Adams, and I honestly wouldn't touch the rest of their wide receiver core. You've got Lazard and MVS. They're going to have their weeks. MVS is going to have some deep touchdowns. Lazard is on the field at times, so he can score, right? But even when these guys play, they're not even always on the field. When they play, it's like 1 to 4 targets, not enough to rely on outside of like maybe in 16-team leagues, but for the most part, it's Adams or nothing for their wide receiver core. For the Vikings, I think you're playing both Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, but it's worth noting, at least, that the Packers, they have been very elite against wide receivers this season. They rank 8th in pass defense DVOA, have allowed the 3rd fewest yards per attempt, given up the 6th fewest schedule adjusted fantasy points to wide receivers. That said, like, you're never benching Justin Jefferson, right? You're always playing him. And I think I'd still play Adam Thielen, but let's say you're in a 10 or 12 team league and you went, I don't know, you went RB0, you've got really, really good wide receivers, and you're kind of like on the fringes saying, okay, is it Thielen or this other guy? I think it's okay to bench Thielen this week because of the matchup. That said, you would have to have multiple top 15 options because I think Thielen's going to end up being ranked in that like 15 to 20 range. And for most of you, it still means that you're starting him, right? He's still Adam Thielen, still going to score touchdowns, still going to have good weeks. And so I would personally still play him for the most part. But again, if you have great core, you can bench him. Ravens at Bears up next. This game is a 45 point total, and the Ravens are 5.5 point road favorites. For the Ravens, Marquise Brown, weekly must start. Don't need to go over that. I think Bateman is the only other receiver I'd play, and he's fine as a lower end option this week. I really wish they would just stop using Sammy Watkins and play Bateman as a full-time receiver over him. I think they will to close the season. I don't know if that shift happens this week. It happens next week, in 2 weeks. I don't know what's going to happen there, but Bateman's clearly the other receiver you'd be playing. I don't think you have to in like an 8 to 12, like 8 through 12 team leagues. When you start getting into 14, 16 leagues, I think he's a very strong play. But let's say you're in a 10 team league, you probably have 3 wide receivers that are better than Bateman, and so you don't really need to, especially in this spot because we know the Ravens like to run the ball, but the Bears are going to come out and they're going to try and run the ball a ton. They're going to try and play slow, and so if both teams are running it, both teams are playing relatively slow, that's not a spot where we're supposed to see, 13 drives. Like, we could see 9 to 10 drives for each team in this game. Could play slower, not many points in the game, so it's not a fantastic spot. You're probably still going to need a touchdown from Bateman, and so fine to play, but a lower end option for me this week. For the Bears, It's going to come down to Allen Robinson. I honestly don't think Allen Robinson is going to play this week. We will learn more later in the day for me. So yesterday for you guys. Of course, I record these the day before they go up. We'll learn more then. We'll probably learn his final status on Saturday night, Sunday morning. Again, I don't think he's going to play. If he misses, I think that Mooney is viable as like a low end 2, but someone that you'd probably want to be playing because most of this offense is concentrated, most of the passing offense is concentrated between those two and Cole Kmet. And so you would just see Robinson's targets kind of split between Mooney and Kmet, and both of them would be pretty strong plays. I don't think they're like slam dunks to produce because this is the Bears, right? But I think they'd be good plays. If Robinson does play, I think Mooney's more of a flex play, more someone that has upside, but definitely his floor is lowered. And then for Robinson, it would just be like, what do the reports say, right? Is he 100% good to go? I mean, that feels unlikely to me. But if he's 100% good to go, I think you can play him in the flex. But any other outcome, I mean, he wasn't even doing that great anyways, and now he's got this injury. Personally, probably just keep him on the bench. Unfortunately, the league I have him in is a 16-team league. And so if he plays, I might have to play him. But even then, so even in a 16-team league, I will contemplate it. So that's kind of where he's at this week. Next up, we've got Dolphins at Jets. This game has a 45-point total, so up half a point from yesterday. And the Dolphins are 3.5-point road favorites for these Dolphins. Parker's, of course, going to miss this week. And I've been looking it up. There's like no real news on Will Fuller right now. So I'm assuming he doesn't play, but I guess that status could change again Friday, Saturday. Regardless, I think the only Miami wide receiver you can trust is Jalen Waddle. He has at least 6 targets in every single game since week 5. He's averaging 9 targets per game over that time. The Jets are obviously like a top matchup for any position to go against. It's not just running backs, like wide receivers, tight ends, like everyone you have that's playing the Jets is in a good spot, right? So I think that Waddle should be treated as a wide receiver 2 this week. And like I said, I'd kind of just leave the rest of the wide receiver core alone. I know that Wilson played well last week, but I'd want to see that happen again, right? I don't think that we can go out and just all of a sudden trust him after one good game, right? I think we'd want to see that happen one more time. For the Jets, we are now going to have Flacco as the starting quarterback, so a little bit of a risk because we don't know which wide receiver he'll favor. You know, it's not the risk saying, oh, maybe he's worse than what they've been having. They've had absolute trash so far, so let's be honest, he's not going to be a huge downgrade. But we don't know if he's going to lock into Crowder. He's going to lock into Moore, Davis. Like, I don't know who he's going to lock into. We have like 3 pass attempts as a sample right now. He happened to be throwing to Elijah Moore, but, you know, we can't exactly extrapolate that. My guess is that Corey Davis is still the most targeted. Then it would be Moore. Then it would be Crowder. But projections are going to have them fairly similar for targets. I'm thinking most projections will have it in that order. I'd still be most excited to play Elijah Moore because he is the most talented. He's the one with the most upside and the one that the team obviously wants to be part of their future. But I think that like Davis and Moore are the only 2 I'd really play, and it would be as like a second flex, honestly. Like even in like a 10 or 12 team league, even your only flex spot, you probably have better options than both Davis and Moore. But as we work into maybe the second flex spot in a 12 team league or into 14 and 16 team leagues, that's where I would probably use those guys. And again, I think my order for them would be Davis, Moore, Crowder. And I think that Davis and Moore would be in that like wide receiver 30 to 35 range. And so it would really just depend on what other options you have if you're starting them. Saints at Eagles up next. This game has a very low 43.5-point total, and the Eagles are 2-point home favorites. For the Saints, I would personally not start anyone. Traquan Smith may have taken over Callaway as the number 1, but there isn't enough volume just going on in this passing attack consistently for either of them to be worth it. Like they'll throw the ball, but they'll throw the ball to so many different players, and they're not, obviously not like a high volume passing attack, not a highly efficient passing attack. And so I'd personally leave them on the bench. And also this matchup is not good. Like you typically don't view the Eagles, I guess, as an elite pass defense, but they've allowed the second fewest scheduled adjusted fantasy points to wide receivers. So it's a brutal spot, not enough volume. I'm not playing Saints wide receivers. For the Eagles, Devonta Smith has been playing very well recently, and rookies tend to break out in the second half of the season, especially at wide receiver. And so he could be really valuable down the stretch. He's going to face up against Lattimore, which is obviously not ideal, right? But he's beaten some quality corners in recent weeks, and he is still skilled enough to get open against any corner. Also, Smith is not the typical build of wide receiver that Lattimore typically shuts down. He shuts down more like bigger wide receivers, not smaller, shifty receivers like Smith. And so I'm still viewing Smith as a solid flex option this week. He can for sure be used at wide receiver too if you need to put him there. Obviously, you maybe prefer the flex, prefer to have a better option because the Eagles would like to run the ball, right? They'd like to limit their pass attempts in this new offense, but will they be able to? Right? I mean, the Saints obviously have one of the best run defenses in the NFL. If the Saints shut down the run game, they're going to have to throw it, right? And when they throw it, let's go to Smith. So I think he's a quality play this week. I would be starting if I have him. I do have him, and I am starting him. Colts at Bills is up next. This game has a 49.5 point total, and the Bills are 7-point home favorites for the Colts. This is a tough spot in Buffalo. That's one of the hardest environments to play in, and Vegas is not exactly projecting fireworks for the Colts offense. That being said, Michael Pittman Jr. has been on a tear recently, and he's the very clear focal point of this passing attack. They're also projected to be trailing in this game, so they should be forced at some point to throw the ball. They don't want to be a pass-first team, but they're more than willing to throw the football, right? I think we view this offense as a ground attack with Jonathan Taylor mixing in Nyheim Hines. They're still willing to throw the ball downfield, throw the football, and so if they're forced to do that in this game, they will, right? And when they do, it's clearly going to Pittman. I understand not wanting to use him in the spot, but I still view him as a low-end wide receiver too, just that his floor and ceiling is a little bit lowered, right? It's pretty unlikely he goes out there and rips apart the Bills' defense. And it's also, within the realm of possibility that the Bills just shut down the Colts. And so since those remain possibilities, lower floor, lower ceiling, but still his average projection is a low end too. And so I think you're still playing him this week. For the Bills, this is a good spot. The Colts are really strong against the run, more mediocre against the pass. And so that's the easiest area for the Bills to attack. Diggs, obviously a weekly must start. You're playing him. I think Sanders and Beasley are fine as lower end flex options. Just know that they also have a low floor, right? We've seen 0 points from Emmanuel Sanders. We've seen Beasley go off for 10 for 100 and then have 2 catches next week, right? And especially Beasley's a little bit banged up right now. I still expect him to play, but he's a little bit banged up. So you don't really know. There's a lot more variance with Beasley, with Emmanuel Sanders, but you can play them because I still think the Bills are going to throw the ball. I have them ranked 32nd and 34th right now among wide receivers. So another situation where it's depends on what you have. Depends on your league size, depends on your wide receiver core, but in that low to mid 30s is where they're ranked. Lions at Browns up next. This game has a low 43.5 point total, and the Browns are massive 11.5 point home favorites for the Lions. It's unlikely we see Goff play this week, but that doesn't really matter, to be honest. You weren't starting Lions wide receivers before. You're not starting them now. Amon St. Brown would be my favorite option of the group, but I don't think you're starting any Lions players or any Lions wide receiver because you're obviously starting Swift. For the Browns, this is a good spot, but understand that Baker's banged up, and they obviously would prefer to hide him in this game. They would prefer to just run the ball a ton with Chubb and Johnson and just only throw it when they need to. Try to get Baker a little bit healthy. Don't put him, in harm's way too much. They're going to win this game. They don't need to go pass heavy. And so I think you can play Jarvis Landry as a flex wide receiver. I think that's what he's worth this week, especially in PPR leagues. But don't be shocked if he has 5-6 targets, turns that into 40 yards on 4 receptions, doesn't score a touchdown, and you're oh, that wasn't that great, right? It's going to be a low volume game. Wouldn't be surprised if Baker throws the ball less than 25 times. And so even if he still has a decently high target share, they don't throw the ball that much, and they run in all the touchdowns, you're still not going to have that great of a game from Landry. Again, I still think that he's a fine play in the flex, just not one that I think has a ton of upside this week. You can play Donovan Peoples-Jones, but you're basically just hoping that on his 3 or 4 deep targets, he catches 1 to 2 of them. I would probably only go there as a Hail Mary play in a 14 or 16 team league. If you're super desperate, the Lions don't have a good defense, right? And so if anyone's going to get open deep, it's him. Next up, Football team at the Panthers. This game has a low 43-point total. A lot of low totals this week. The Panthers are also 3-point home favorites. For the football team, it is McLaurin or no one for me. He's the only wide receiver getting bankable volume. And the Panthers have like a really, really strong pass defense. They rank second in pass defense DVOA. Have allowed the fewest yards per attempt, the fourth fewest scheduled adjusted fantasy points to wide receivers. So definitely a tough spot, but you're playing McLaurin every week unless you have multiple other top 15 options at wide receiver, in which case you can consider benching him, but I don't know. Like, I'd have a tough time benching Terry McLaurin. He's still a very talented wide receiver, the focal point of the passing attack. I personally would still play him even in a brutal spot. For the Panthers, I'm expecting Cam Newton to start, but obviously, like, if he doesn't, that's just a downgrade to everyone. Assuming he does start, this is a good spot. The football team's defense ranks bottom 3 in all 3 of those stats you look at. DVOA, yards per pass attempt, scheduled adjusted fantasy points to the position. They're bottom 3 in all those. Despite what you saw last week against Tampa Bay, they're still not a good pass defense. DJ Moore is a wide receiver too, and is just the clear off of this passing attack. Robbie Anderson is an upside play in like your second flex spot, but I can't rank him inside the top 36. Hopefully Cam coming back and like save his season, but you know, he hasn't looked great. And so I want to see him perform well another week before I'm willing to start him. I'm also hoping that Cam being quarterback can maybe help Terrace Marshall do something this season. He's a talented wide receiver, but he just hasn't done really anything. Obviously, we're not playing him, but I'm just going to watch this part of the game to hope that Terrace Marshall does something. That's what I'm going to be looking for, and maybe we can reassess next week if he does something this week. 49ers at Jaguars is up next. This game has a 45.5 point total. 49ers are 6.5 point road favorites. For the 49ers, Deebo Samuel is dealing with an injury right now, but he's still expected to play. Assuming that he is out there, play him, obviously. Brandon Ayuk has been a massive disappointment this season, but he's finally out of the doghouse, and he's been running a route on virtually every pass snap in the last 3 weeks. The results are starting to show as well. He's had some nice games. It didn't really show last week, but they threw the ball 19 times, right? They completed 15 of 19 passing attempts while running the ball 42 times. You're not expecting a bunch of fireworks, right? But this offensive passing attack is pretty much concentrated between Deebo, Kittle, and Ayuk. And so if they can enter a game where they throw the ball more, that's obviously going to help Brandon Ayuk. I think he's a solid flex play moving forward, especially this week against the Jaguars. The Jaguars have a really solid run defense. Obviously, the 49ers are still going to run the ball and probably still going to run it effectively, probably still going to win. And so we could definitely see a lower pass attempt game. But there's at least a chance that the Jaguars defense holds their own on the ground and forces the 49ers to throw it, in which case they have an awful pass defense and the 49ers will be still successful throwing the ball. So if the 49ers do struggle, we can see them merit out. Also, Elijah Mitchell is questionable this week, breaks his finger last week. I'm expecting him to play, but of course he might not play. And so if he's out, they're going to move Jeff Wilson to the starting spot. It's at least possible that if Jeff Wilson struggles more than Mitchell would have, that we also see that outcome where they throw the ball more. So there are a few outs to playing some of these pass catchers for the 49ers. But again, obviously, you're starting like Kittle, you're starting Deebo Samuel, and I think Brandon Ayuk more of a flex play. For the Jaguars, I have a hard time starting any of their receivers. The volume has just completely dried up now that they're also using Dan Arnold, also using Agnew. Like, both those guys being a thing just takes all these targets away, spreads them out. It's not a good passing attack in general. Marvin Jones is the only one I'd consider, but he hasn't cracked 35 receiving yards since week 6, and so I don't exactly feel fantastic about using him. Next up, we've got the Texans at the Titans. This game has a 44.5 point total, and the Titans are 10-point home favorites. This game's fairly easy to break down. Obviously, start A.J. Brown every week, especially against the Texans. And then the only Texans wide receiver that you can really trust is Brandon Cooks. He is a high ceiling, sort of low floor just because the offense isn't good. You could see them completely fall apart. Plus, the Titans have a strong defense. But he's still a wide receiver too, right? He's someone who can go out there and command 12 to 15 targets, catch 10 of them for like 120 score. That can happen, for sure. And so I think you're playing Brandon Cooks. Just understand the Texans are awful. The Titans have a good defense. And would it be shocking if he had 3 for 30? No. But I think you're still playing him as a wide receiver too. Next up, we've got Bengals at Raiders. This game has a 50.5 point total, and the Bengals are 1-point road favorites. For the Bengals, Chase and Higgins are both seeing really bankable volume, consistent volume. Maybe they don't hit their ceiling every single week, but obviously you're starting Chase. And I think that while Higgins has underproduced given the volume, you look at that volume and I don't see how you can bench him. So I'm playing Chase, I'm playing Higgins. Boyd is more of a fringe play. Should see in that 3 to 7 target range, maybe even 2 to 7 target range, which isn't great. Fairly low upside scoring too. They're going to use Zoma, they're going to use Mixon, they're going to use Chase, they're going to use Higgins, all ahead of Boyd in the red zone, and so that's not fantastic. I think you can use them at that second flex spot in a deeper format, but you got to be desperate. I really don't want to start Tyler Boyd this week. For the Raiders, Hunter Renfrow is the top option. He's got 8, 9, and 9 targets the last 3 weeks, and he's got exactly 7 receptions in each of those games. The problem with him is he's getting 7 receptions, right? So you're like, oh, wow, he's going off. No, it doesn't come with many yards because his receptions are so close to the line of scrimmage. They're so low upside. So he can have 6, 7 receptions for only 40 or 50 yards. Still decent. If he's going to get 7 receptions, you're still looking at him. And he actually has a role in the red zone because of how gifted of a route runner he is. Just understand that the ceiling can only be hit if he has 10 or 11 receptions, which is still a lot to ask from any wide receiver in the NFL. I think you're fine playing him as a flex wide receiver. Just understand that it's a high floor, low ceiling play. But someone that if you are clearly favored, we'll say you clearly have the better team and you don't want someone to go out there and post 0, Hunter Renfrow is very unlikely to post 0, right? He still has a pretty high floor. And so if you're just looking for locked in points, he's not a bad option. I had to play Bryan Edwards last week, and I feel like I really got bailed out with that touchdown catch he had. He's going to see 4 to 6 targets. He's going to catch 3 to 4 of them. So the projection is not going to be great. I have him ranked as a wide receiver 47 right now. So if you're in that range, he's fine. But again, 4 to 6 targets is not something we really want to rely on, like I said. And so not an ideal play, but fine. He's talented, but 4 to 6 targets, right? Cardinals at Seahawks. Up next, this game has a 48.5 point total, and the Cardinals are 2.5 point road favorites. For the Cardinals, a lot obviously depends on injuries. You've got Kyler and Hopkins, both questionable. Hopkins looks much closer to doubtful right now, so I'm not expecting him to play. If Hopkins does miss, I think Kirk will be flex viable, and the rest would be more desperation plays in deeper formats. If he's out and Kyler's confirmed in, then I think Kirk moves up to a wide receiver 2. Pretty decent play. I think that AJ Green and Moore would be still lower end options, probably ranked in that 40 to 50 range. But it's possible you're looking in that range. And of course, any wide receiver playing with Kyler Murray without Hopkins has value, right? Because they could score a touchdown, they could catch a deep pass, they could, Rondale Moore could catch a screen pass that goes 80 yards, right? He's gifted enough to do that. But yeah, I'd really just follow the rankings on this one because so much depends on injuries. For Seattle, Metcalf missed some practices this week, but it looks like he and Lockett are fully expected to play. They were awful last week, just as a team, not Metcalf, Lockett, just the team didn't score, right? They just played horribly. I'm not expecting that to happen again. Of course, the Cardinals do have a very strong pass defense, but this Seahawks passing attack is so concentrated that you don't need them to go nuclear as a team for Lockett and Metcalf to still have good games, right? I expect them to play better, especially in the second week with Wilson back, and so I think you're playing both of them for sure this week. The best game of the week is up next. Cowboys at Chiefs. This is one that everyone's going to want to watch. 56 point total, 2.5 point spread in favor of the home team, the Chiefs. For Dallas, you're definitely starting Lamb, definitely starting Cooper. Kansas City has a below average passing attack, and they're going to put up points, right? Kansas City's going to score here, so Dallas is going to be forced to throw. They're going to be successful when they do so. I think you can consider Gallup as a low-end flex play this week. He played just over half the snaps in his return, but it was a blowout, right? He would have played more in a competitive game, and I would not be overly surprised to see him get 6 to 7 looks, have a roll in the red zone, have a roll downfield. I think he's going to be a quality play this week and someone that actually has a decent floor. And so I think he's a good play in the flex if you've got him. If you've been hanging on to him, this might be the spot to play him. And so I think you can absolutely do so. For the Chiefs, obviously start Tyreek Hill. And I probably wouldn't start any of their other wide receivers. They're not getting enough consistent volume to worth starting. Let's watch the snaps and the target share for Byron Pringle. He's probably the one I'm most excited about if they start to use him more. It seems like they are. Not enough for me to trust him this week, but if he goes out there and he plays like 70% of the snaps and he has like 5-6 targets, we can start to look at him moving forward. So keep an eye on that in this game, but for now, just stick with Tyreek Hill on this offense. The Sunday night game is going to be Steelers at Chargers. This game has a 47-point total, and the Chargers are 6-point home favorites. For the Steelers, we're going to have to see if Claypool and Big Ben are able to play. Obviously, these things are going to impact the offense. I think you're playing Deontay Johnson regardless. He's a talented wide receiver, clearly the alpha in this offense, getting enough looks like you're just playing him. If Claypool is active, just watch the rankings because I'm going to try and look into like how active is he? Is he a decoy? Is he going to play a lot? I don't really know right now, and so follow the rankings on that one. And then no other wide receivers really on my radar. Even if Claypool's out, like sure, James Washington in like a deeper format, but you're probably not going there. And I really don't care who the quarterback ends up being. Like there's not a huge drop off either way. So it's really Deontay Johnson or bust, but maybe Claypool if we get a good indication from him. For the Chargers, we talked earlier this week about how Mike Williams is no longer in the Michael Thomas role in this offense. He obviously was going off in that role, but they decided to change it, and now he's more just a deep threat that lowers his floor, lowers his ceiling. I think you're still starting him as wide receiver 2 because he's still got that upside. He's still, capable in this offense. He's still going to get some looks. He had multiple chances to score last week. He dropped a slant pass that would have been a touchdown. He got tackled at like the 1 or 2 yard line. So he could have last week had 2 touchdowns, and you wouldn't be complaining about using him this week, right? And so I think the touchdowns will come back. I think he's still going to be fine. And so I would personally still play him. But again, as a wide receiver 2, and then obviously play Keenan Allen. The Steelers historically have been very bad at defending slot receivers. So play him, right? He's been going off. Monday night game. Giants at Bucks. This one has a 49.5-point total. Bucks are 10.5-point home favorites. For the Giants, I am not pumped to play any of their wide receivers, but this is a matchup, against a Bucks defense. It's going to force you to throw it. They're going to stop the run, force you to throw the ball, and they'll probably force you to throw the ball pretty quickly, and so that'll benefit Kadarius Toney. I think Toney's the only one I want to play, and it would only be as like a flex option, right? I don't feel comfortable with this passing attack. I don't think Shepard's going to play, so it's really just Golladay and Toney. I haven't seen it from Golladay this season. He hasn't looked fantastic, and so if you've got him and you need to play him in the flex, fine. He projects fine, so you can do it. But I would really just prefer to only play Toney. I think he has the most upside. He's definitely the most talented of this wide receiver core. The one that, they're able to scheme looks to. They can't do as well of a job scheming looks to Golladay because it's just easier to get the ball to Toney quickly and let him do stuff after the catch. So I think he's a better play. But again, I'm not pumped to play any of them. For the Bucks, it doesn't seem like Antonio Brown's going to play this week, but obviously check that. If he does miss, then obviously play, Godwin and Evans. If he plays, you're playing those 2 anyway, so it doesn't even matter. Just keep Godwin and Evans in your lineup. I personally have Antonio Brown, unless we know for sure on Sunday when these other games lock that he's going to play. I'm keeping him on the bench because I'm not putting him in the starting lineup, getting to Monday, realizing that I have no one to play, trying to figure out if I have to drop someone for like Tyler Johnson so I can get 6 points. It's just not worth it to me. And so I'm personally just going to, again, unless we know for sure on Sunday that Antonio Brown's playing, I'm not going to play him. I'll put someone else in that spot. Then hope he plays, hope he goes off, and hope I get Antonio Brown back and can use him in weeks in the future. But I'm not going to personally play him this week unless we know. So that is it for my breakdown of every wide receiver core this week. Remember, you can see my exact rankings under every scoring format and my projections at our website, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. That, my friends, is the end of this one. Hope you all enjoy. If you did, how about hitting that like button? And how about subscribing to the channel if you're new here? Thanks for watching.